Welcome back to Overtime. Mark, we talked college football in our last segment. Let's go to college basketball. It's been a really good year so far in the early part of the season for teams in the state of Alabama, including the two teams that play on the highest level in the SEC with both Alabama and Auburn. Bama suffered a loss last week. You and I talked about it to Memphis. They bounced back with a nice win over Jacksonville State. JSU is another good program. The record might not show it, but they played really competitive basketball. Bama drops down 4 spots in the latest AP poll. They remain, though, in the top 10. We'll take a look at that poll right now behind defending national champion Baylor, who picked up 60 of the 61 first-place votes. Arizona has the other one. And then some of your usual suspects, teams like Duke, teams like Gonzaga, UCLA, Kansas having a really good year as well, and then some teams that might be a little bit of surprises like USC, like Iowa State. What are some of the things that you've noticed early on for both Alabama, the second highest ranked 2-loss team, and they also beat the other team in Gonzaga? Some of the things you've been looking at for the Crimson Tide here early.
Well, I thought the way they played against Jack State, we talked about that game, I think Jack State posed a real defensive problem for them because they just weren't their normal self shooting the ball. They only scored 65 points, which is the average and over 80 per game. So I thought Jack State really defended them well, but Jack State also has really long guys where you talk about Kane Henry and Jay Paul, Juwan Purdue. These guys are all probably like almost 7 feet in length, and they possess a lot of problems for Alabama defensively. You look at Shackelford and J.D. Davidson, both had a horrible game, combined 1 for 13 against Jack State. That was a big problem for them, but they still managed to win the game, and I think that's what you got to take out of it overall. So in the top 10, the other thing I'm looking at is, the SEC is a pretty solid conference from top to bottom, and Alabama right now is the only SEC team in there.
Exactly. We'll go to the 11 through 25. They're the Auburn Tigers. They had a lot of potential distractions, but they got through it, was able to win a couple of games without their head coach and Bruce Pearl. We'll dive into that and more in just a moment, but also got a big win on the road with Bruce Pearl back at St. Louis. You also take a look at the other teams in the top 25. You mentioned the SEC. LSU sitting there at number 17, Tennessee at 19, 20 with Kentucky sitting there. Some other teams have been bouncing in and out of the polls, but overall I think it's a pretty solid year for the upper echelon of this league.
Right, LSU obviously off to a great start. They really haven't played anybody of note yet. Tennessee, is going to be good this year. Kentucky probably isn't the Kentucky that they used to be, but they're still pretty good, and I think they'll definitely challenge in the SEC. And then Auburn, you know how good Auburn is, and I think Auburn's really starting to separate themselves. Jabari Smith, one of the best freshmen in the country.
Exactly. Let's talk a little bit more about the Alabama-Jacksonville State basketball game. Bama really needed a bounce back after losing their first road game at Memphis earlier midweek last week, but they did so in nice fashion. And you mentioned JSU, some of the players they have. The COVID year was a kind of a good thing for JSU because they brought back all that experience from last year's basketball team, and they played a really tough game in Coleman Coliseum against the Crimson Tide. Yeah, they only scored 59. They held Alabama to one of its lowest point totals of the season so far, and like you said, locked down their best player and one of the best players in the SEC, in Jaden Shackelford.
Yeah, and they were winning 41-39 in the second half, and Alabama goes on a 21-3 run, takes that game back, and the big part for Alabama in the second half, Quinterly able to penetrate, dish off when he needed to, was able to complete at the basket, scored 11 of his 15 points in the second half. And then when you look at how they shot from three-point range, his half-court shot, or not half-court, but it was the buzzer beater at the end of the first half. They were 3 for 16 from three-point range before that, 5 for 14 after that. Keon Ellis was obviously their best player, but also they had a big second half from Bediako, 7 points, 7 rebounds, 5 blocks, and Miles hitting a couple three-point shots in the second half to really put them on a roll. Once again, Quinterly able to penetrate, really changed this game.
For sure.
Really opened it up a little bit, helped Alabama with getting a little bit better shots, especially on a night where J.D. Davidson and Shackelford were 1 for 13, 0 for 8 for three-point range. And not only that, between the two of them, they get to the free throw line at least 6 times a game. Only shot 2 free throws tonight or against Jack State on Saturday night. But Jack State was pretty good.
For sure.
And for them to hold Alabama to only 65 points, and Alabama didn't have a field goal the final 4:23 of the game.
Right.
So Jack State can D you up. And I thought this was a pretty good test, especially when you get nothing from Shackelford, and your best freshman doesn't give you anything either. And you still managed to win, and still managed to win without thinking, without that much stress. I mean, I know when you get D'd up defensively, it can cause a bunch of uncomfortable moments, but I thought they handled themselves well. They do what they do well, as they defended really well as well, and they were able to beat Jack State. And what do they want, like 15 straight at home now, which is definitely what you want to be able to build at home, is the fact that anybody who comes in here, they're not only going to lose, but they're going to know they were in a fight, and that they'll remember what happened to them when they came here.
Exactly. They protected Coleman Coliseum very well early on. They'll play outside of Coleman Coliseum. They're actually going to Birmingham for their next basketball game. They were scheduled to play Colorado State in the CM Newton Classic, honoring, of course, one of the great Alabama coaches. But because the Rams had a COVID outbreak in their locker room, they're unable to compete. So in less than 24 hours, Bama was able to schedule a game with Davidson. So they'll play Davidson, the alma mater of the great Steph Curry. They'll play them tomorrow at Legacy Arena at the newly renovated BJCC at Legacy Arena over in Birmingham. So it should be a really good matchup for a couple of teams there. If you're interested in college basketball, it'd be a good one tomorrow night in Birmingham. For that matchup, tip-off there is at 6 o'clock at Legacy Arena. Meanwhile, let's go to the Auburn Tigers. This is a basketball team that I think we've gotten a chance to kind of see them play in a lot of different kinds of games. They're a really high-scoring team. They're getting a lot of great play out of Walker Kessler early on. He also led the Tigers with 19 points and a big win over St. Louis. What are some of the things that you've noticed about Bruce Pearl's squad early on?
Kessler's a stud.
Oh, yeah, he's a beast.
I mean, not only that, but he has great foot movement.
Right.
He's very fast. He's very agile. I mean, he's almost every time that someone penetrates, I'm thinking he's going to throw the ball right back in their face because he's that good at blocking shots. Yuri Collins is a very good basketball player for St. Louis. He drove Auburn nuts. Not only did he hand out 8 assists, but he also had 12 rebounds, 13 points. And I think he really did a great job penetrating and creating a lot of opportunities for St. Louis. The other thing that St. Louis did really well is they absolutely pounded Auburn on the offensive boards. They had 19 offensive rebounds, created a bunch of second shots. That's Auburn's weakness. They can't get out-rebounded 46-27 in the SEC and expect to win. But Wendell Green, I thought, did a great job penetrating as well, dishing off, and Jabari Smith able to hit some big three-point shots for Auburn. That's really going to be their bread and butter. If you notice that when they set picks at the top of the key, and Kessler's one of the guys who really sets good picks at the top of the key, that's what keys a lot of their either penetration or three-point shooting. And I think Auburn did that really well this game. But also, in the first half, they held St. Louis to only 27 points on 35% shooting. And then St. Louis went crazy the first 12 minutes of the second half, scoring 33 points and shooting almost 70% from the field. And then Auburn down 60-47 at that point, closed out the game. And Bruce Pearl said it himself, you're down 13, less than 10 minutes on a road. You normally don't win that game.
Exactly.
But that was a real big win for Auburn, that they can come back. St. Louis is tough. I know they're Atlantic 10, and come on, Atlantic 10, whatever. But that's a tough place to win, St. Louis, on the road, and they did that. They held in the game. It was like, Jesus is a stud, man.
Yeah, he's awesome.
So I think that Auburn, going forward, has got a lot of pieces that can get them far in the NCAA tournament.
I think so, too. And you mentioned Kessler and seeing a lot of his dunks on Saturday. He had a great game. He's had 2 back-to-back really good games, leading the Tigers in scoring, 19 points last time and 14 points in their game before against North Alabama. So it's a really good time, I think, for both Alabama and Auburn. Meanwhile, talk teams in and around the state of Alabama. Those two are not the only ones having a really good year overall. Take a look at UAB off to a nice start, 9-3. They'll play on Wednesday. Auburn will also play on Wednesday against perennial power Murray State out of the OVC. Troy also 8-4. They're at Mercer on Wednesday. South Alabama, it's a really good team. I got to see them up close when they played Jacksonville State, 9-3. They're against SIU Edwardsville tomorrow. And then Sanford also 9-2. They play a really fun style up and down the floor with Coach Bucky McMillan. They're at Ole Miss on Tuesday. And JSU, their record is not indicative of the kind of team that they
play
are.
A tough schedule.
Exactly. They play a very tough schedule early on. 5-6 through 11 games. They're at Little Rock coming up tomorrow as well. This is a really, really good time, I think, for for teams in and around the state of Alabama to have a really strong part of their schedule right now in the non-conference part. And we'll be a bit surprised to see a lot of teams from this state in the big dance.
Yeah, I'm expecting that as well.
Exactly. So we'll have more on that as the season rolls along, as we get closer and closer to conference play for each and every one of these teams. Well, coming up next here on Overtime, we'll talk a little bit of NFL, some things that we haven't seen in a very long time transpired over the weekend. We'll discuss next.